Good morning, Jeffrey Gremlins. This is week 2 of our online learning. I decided to read a story to you today, and there's something special about this story called Bread Lab. Those of you who know me really well, especially Mrs. Molina and Miss Shelley, know that there's a story behind this book. I did get this book from the public library, and I got it about a year ago. And I keep all my books in a special bag. And when I went to return all my books, they said, "You're missing Bread Lab." And I thought, that's crazy. I know I return Bread Lab. I always keep my books in the same bag, just like I tell my students all the time. And I know something happened here that might be happening at your house these past few weeks. And my kids cleaned their rooms very, very well. And lo and behold, what showed up but Bread Lab. So after all this time of me insisting that I returned my book, it seems that the book was here all along. So once this situation is done and we can go about freely about our business, I will definitely be returning this book and wiping that fine away from my account at the public library. The point is, when you're home these weeks, please look carefully through your bookshelves. If you happen to have any books that you know are overdue from the library, set them aside, put them in your backpack, put them somewhere so that when we come back to school and see each other again, you can drop them off by me. But even the librarian misplaces books from time to time. All right, this is Bread Lab. This is by Kim Binchowski. Binchowski? Not really sure. Anyway, I also included a video next to this on our website where you can see how to make your own sourdough starter. And I'm going to do that once I'm done with this book, and I'll keep you updated on how mine goes. All right, because all good bread starts with a starter. So let me just get started on this. This one's kind of a long one, so we'll see if we make it through. Bread Lab by Kim Binchowski. It was a sleepy Saturday morning for some people, but Iris had to wake up early. All of her pets were hungry, and animals never sleep in on weekends. Iris needed to hurry if she was going to feed her dog Charlie, 2 cats, 3 rabbits, 4 fish, and 5 chickens before Aunt Mary arrived. Iris liked to call Aunt Mary Plant Mary because she was a plant scientist. It made Aunt Mary laugh every time. Charlie barked. Aunt Mary was here. She was all hugs and smiles and boxes and bags, and she was on a mission. "Let's turn your kitchen into a bread lab, Iris," she said. "I hope you're up for making some whole wheat sourdough bread from scratch. How does that sound?" Woohoo! Iris loved bread. Toast with butter and blackberry jam especially. She was definitely going to need her notebook today. Aunt Mary pulled a jar from her bag slowly, like it was a treasure. "Iris, meet Flora," she said. Iris peered deeply into the jar, but saw only goo. "She's my starter," Aunt Mary explained. "To make bread, you need a starter to start the process." "Why did you give your starter a name?" asked Iris. "Because I think of her as a pet," said Aunt Mary. "Flora is full of microbes, creatures so small you can see them only with a microscope. I feed her every day, just like you feed Charlie here." "I want to feed Flora," said Iris. "What does she eat?" "Flour and water," said Aunt Mary. "Sounds delicious, right, Charlie?" Charlie would happily eat flour and water. "When the microbes in Flora eat, they release bubbles," said Aunt Mary. "Those bubbles make the bread rise, and the bubbles are why bread is so holy." "Wait a minute, what?" said Iris. "Holy as in bread with lots of little holes?" said Aunt Mary. Iris didn't miss a beat. "Whole wheat bread." "Exactly," said Aunt Mary. Iris picked up the jar of goo. "So can we feed Flora now?" "Actually, I just brought Flora in that jar to show you what a starter looks like," said Aunt Mary. "I used Flora to create a sourdough mix. Yesterday, I put a tablespoon of Flora in this bowl along with some whole wheat flour and warm water and stirred it all together. Now look, it's puffy and still growing. Smell it. It's yeasty, sweet, and just a bit tangy to put the sour in sourdough." Iris sniffed the sourdough mix. "It smells like grass and lemons." Iris poked the pillowy mix with her finger. It sprang right back up. I think I'm hungrier than a microbe. I could cook eggs and toast for breakfast. Would you like some, Plant Mary? Charlie wagged his tail so wildly that Aunt Mary laughed. Absolutely. Looks like we're all hungry. Good timing, too. The sourdough mix still needs more time to rise. As Iris munched her toast, she picked up the package of bread and started to read the ingredient list. But it was full of words she couldn't pronounce. Wow, did you bring all this stuff to make our sourdough bread? No need. Our recipe has only 4 ingredients, said Aunt Mary. Just flour? Asked Iris. Okay, let's see. The sourdough mix has flora, whole wheat flour and water, right? What's the 4th thing? Aunt Mary waggled the salt shaker. Salt, said Iris. Right, said Aunt Mary. We have everything we need to get started. It's feeding time, Iris whispered into the bowl. She measured exactly the right amount of flour, water, and salt, and then added each ingredient to the sourdough mix. Iris imagined the tiny microbes and flora happily gobbling up the food and burping up bubbles. Use your hands to mix it all together, said Aunt Mary. Iris washed her hands, then dug in. The sticky dough felt good, oozing between her fingers like mud pies. Aunt Mary leaned over the bowl. Great work, Iris. Now it needs to rest. But not us. Let's clean up our bubble lab. Are you ready for the next step? Kneading the dough? Aunt Mary put the gooey glob on the kitchen counter. Kneading the dough? Iris asked. Ha, said Aunt Mary. Yes, we knead it, but we also knead it. Kneading makes the dough stronger and less sticky. Iris folded, scraped, and turned the oozy dough again and again until her arms felt like they might fall off. Is the dough strong enough now, Plant Mary? Her aunt gave it a poke. I wish I could say yes, but the dough still needs you. Then I'll need it, said Iris. She flexed her arm muscles like a superhero and kept on going. After the kneading was finished and the dough had time to rest, Aunt Mary showed Iris the next step, folding. Stretch, fold, 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 Iris chanted. Now let it rest again, said Aunt Mary. Then we do this 2 more times. Iris made sketches of every step in her notebook. Iris could see the bubbles form while the dough was resting. The microbes are busy. It's like magic, she said. Magic? More like science, said Aunt Mary. Our bread is alive. Can the dough please be ready, Plant Mary? Begged Iris. Charlie whimpered. Aunt Mary laughed. You're both in luck. It's time to shape the dough. She showed Iris how to fold the dough into a log to fit the loaf pan. The dough needs about 3 hours to rest, so we can take a break too, said Aunt Mary. Finally, said Iris. That means we have plenty of time for a picnic in the park. What a feast, said Aunt Mary. And all the food you brought, apples, peanut butter, blackberry jam, chocolate, and crackers, came from plants. Did I ever tell you why I became a plant scientist? I don't think so, said Iris. Why did you? Ever since I was your age, I wanted to grow food. Now I help farmers grow food, Aunt Mary said, feeding a crumb to a hungry ant. In fact, the flour for the bread we're making came from wheat grown by farmers I know. I never knew plant science had anything to do with food, said Iris. No one thought about plants more than Plant Mary did. Iris loved that about her. Time flew by as they ate their lunch, identified dandelion parts, and found animal shapes in the clouds. When Iris and Aunt Mary got back home, Iris screamed, "No!" All she could see was the pan of dough and Charlie's drooling jaws. All that kneading for nothing. Iris lunged for the pan just in time. The bread was saved. I guess Charlie wanted to be our bread tester, said Iris. Good thing he didn't eat that dough because it's still rising, said Aunt Mary. He would be one sick dog. Iris imagined Charlie swelling up like a hot air balloon and floating away. Let's get this dough into the oven, said Aunt Mary. Iris thought the smell of baking bread was the best smell in the world. Finally, Aunt Mary opened the oven door. It's ready. She took the loaf pan out to cool. Iris could hear the crust crackle and pop. It even sounds delicious, she said. Charlie barked. Iris's parents were back. "Mom, Dad, we turned the kitchen into a bread lab," said Iris. She held up the loaf like a trophy. "Who wants to try our special home-baked whole wheat sourdough bread?" Everyone did, of course, especially Charlie. Aunt Mary, Iris, and her parents all gathered close. Iris took a big bite of her slice. "Mmm," she said, smiling at Aunt Mary. "They really did it. They baked their very own loaf of bread, and everyone loved it." Charlie liked his crunchy bit of crust too, but he was easy to impress. Iris opened her notebook and wrote, "Our bread tastes nutty, sweet, and a little bit tart." Aunt Mary leaned over to see her notes. "Hey, that's a pretty good description of you, Iris," she said. "And you too," said Iris. Iris couldn't wait to bake with Aunt Mary again. It was a good day in the bread lab. Charlie thought so too. This book includes facts about bread and how to make the bread and what it takes to make the sourdough mix. And I have included a link to that right here on this page. So give it a try sometime. All you need is whole wheat flour and water. And I did read somewhere that even if you don't have whole wheat flour, you can use regular unbleached flour as well. So there's all kinds of information at the back of this book. And again, there's information about a bread lab, which is in Washington State University, and some information about the creators of the book, and then also more websites that you can explore if you're interested. And that was Bread Lab by Kim Banczewski and Bethany Ekonopoulos, illustrated by Hyland Choi.